This crowd rises to its feet. Vaccaro slammed it home. Garland left wing, 3-ball. Perfect! Garland one of the lane, locked to Mobley. Pow! And Allen blocked the shot at the rim. Pow! With the left hand and a foul.
Welcome to the Chase Down Podcast, part of the Cavs media family. I'm your host, Justin Rowan. The Chase Down is presented by Fubo, the official streaming partner of the Cavs. Watch over 350 channels of live sports and TV, including FanDuel Sports Network without cable. There's no cost and no commitment. Try for free at FuboTV.com/Cavs. The holiday season is over. I hope you guys all had a terrific time. We are getting back to Cavs basketball. While the Cleveland Cavaliers probably should have been played on Christmas, they didn't. But Boston gave us a gift anyways by taking an L and giving the Cavs a 4-game lead in the Eastern Conference. Joining me today is my co-host Carter Rodriguez. Carter, how you doing, buddy?
Doing good, brother. I am deep into the holiday fatigue at this point. Every time I look at my house, I just see piles of toys that we haven't even opened yet, and it's oh, brother.
Oh, poor you. You got so many gifts, so many material
I
things.
didn't get so many gifts. Let the record show.
That's fair. You're flexing on us a little bit, though. You know what? Your gift to me is your presence. It's being here on this podcast. It always feels like a treat being with you. It always feels like a treat, being here day after Christmas. A whole bunch of people tuning in on the YouTube. We really do appreciate you guys. Make sure you like, subscribe, click notification bell, leave comments to help the algorithm. We really do appreciate you guys. We appreciate those listening via podcast. And the vibes just keep on rolling, man. The Cavs are 26-4 through 30 games. Just an absolutely insane start to this season. Win over the Utah Jazz. Maybe a little closer than you would have expected. I didn't have that marked on my bingo card as a clutch time game for the Cavs. But despite the fact that Utah kind of made it a 1 and 2 possession game late, it still felt like the Cavs were in control throughout, and they got it done with a pretty good team effort from the starting lineup on that night.
Yeah, well, just to quickly hit on the 26-4 thing, I did some digging. Just looking at some of the great teams in NBA history, the 96 Bulls, who of course went 72-10. They started out their year 27-3, right there. The 2016 Warriors started out 29-1, which you really do forget how insane that 73 win season was. No idea why we forget. And then of course the 09 Cavs, who hold the franchise record for wins at 66. They started out, you guessed it, 26-4. So
really,
yep, they are right there with the best teams in the history of the franchise, which I think you knew without looking that up, that they were right there with the best teams in the history of the franchise, at least in terms of regular season success up to this point. But it's really, really fun to see. With regard to the Jazz, yeah, I thought they gave them a game. It was they made them work for that win.
Yeah, Utah played well. Like honestly, they played well. Like sometimes when the Cavs play against the middle of a pack opponents, I know we touched on this on the last podcast where, the Cavs have an elite offense and defense against the best and worst teams in the league. But when you get to kind of that middle, it gets a little sketchy at times. They don't always take it very seriously. I thought Utah just actually came out and gave a really good effort. Obviously, the Cavs were lacking a little bit of size with no Dean Wade in the lineup. You're missing Isaac Okoro for some perimeter defense. And I'll say, watching that game, I thought the offensive rebounding woes were a little overstated. Like people brought it up, but a lot of those rebounds, like it was 6 or 7 on one possession that accounted for 2 second chance points. And, it's very frustrating to watch those stretches. But at the end of the day, it's not like, okay, you're giving up a second chance opportunity every trip down and the other team is scoring a bunch of points off it. But I thought Utah's size gave them trouble at times. And I thought that they just played very hard. They played a very good game. And, the Cavs, who, listening to some of the post-game interviews, were waiting for a close game. We're waiting for an opportunity to play a little more minutes. Maybe that contributed to them playing with their food to some extent.
Yeah, I don't know if they played with their food. I mean, I think this with Okoro and Wade out of the lineup, and it's pretty clear that Kenny isn't ready to trust Jalen Tyson in big minutes, given that Sam Merrill got the start. You're starting a 6'1", 6'2", 6'4", point guard, shooting guard, small forward against a team who is playing a 6'2", 6'3", 6'2", 6'6", 6'11", with Micah Potter at the 4, who's also a 6'10", 6'9", 6'10" player. So just a lot of big dudes on the floor. And when that's the case, like, unless you're in perfect position on the box out, you're gonna just get jumped over a lot or moved out of the way a lot. And like, I do think that they got beat up a little bit physically. I think anytime one of Dean, Evan, or Jarrett misses time, the size issue can kind of pop back up for this team.
Yeah.
Where, I think when healthy, I don't think they really have a problem with their size. But, they're one bit of foul trouble or one rolled ankle away from it kind of at all times. And I thought the Jazz played a really, really good game. They also shot the cover off the ball. They hit 19 threes on 44 attempts, which is really, really good. And they just took advantage of every opportunity. Can I say a brief aside that is for nobody but me? I don't get how Svi Mikhailuk just never gets a roster spot. He's always fighting for his life. And every time I watch that dude play, he hits 2 unbelievably difficult threes a game. He's pretty big. He's got like a decent floor game. I'm a little surprised he's just like perpetually fighting for his NBA life. I don't get it.
The shooting's a little inconsistent, and there's not a lot else he's bringing to the table. Like there are quite a bit of defensive issues, and he's been banged up quite a bit throughout his career too. So when you don't have kind of an elite skill that you're bringing to the table, and you are bringing availability issues to the table, that starts to become a little difficult. And I got to watch a decent amount of him when he was playing with the Raptors, and it just didn't really make the most of the opportunity. But
it's the classic seems to have nice games against my favorite team kind of player.
Yeah, which that can go a long way to forming an impression. But I think you're on the money. Especially when you're in a situation where Isaac Okoro's out of the lineup. He's been doing a better job rebounding. Max Strus still on a minutes restriction, even though he contributed 6 in his 21 minutes. You're susceptible to that when you play a really big team. And typically when you see these games throughout an 82-game season where a lesser team is able to hang around, they're usually either A, winning the physicality battle and getting extra possessions, or B, shooting the hell out of the ball. And they were C, both, when it came to the Cavs. And I think that's the nice thing about this Cavs season is we actually have had a decent amount of kind of those shooting variance games where another team just kind of goes off. And you just don't feel it the same way that you did in the past.
Well, you don't feel it because the Cavs are always right there with them.
Right. Whereas in the past, it felt like the math issue was catching up to them, which, it's funny because for the most part this season, they've taken fewer threes than they did last year. They're just so much more proficient with it. The offensive execution is just at such a higher level. They are generating consistently good shots, and it doesn't feel like they are struggling in the mud to generate good offensive looks. So,
well, I feel like with a team like Boston, the way you want to beat them is, one way to beat them is they have a bunch of guys who are pretty good shooters, but not a lot of great shooters on the floor. I mean, like maybe, White, Drew, Tatum, even Horford, all those guys can have an 0 of 8 night, right. And they generally win by just enough guys are hitting that it's okay. Whereas I feel like the Cavs, they just don't have any dudes who aren't good shooters that take a lot of attempts. It's really just Evan and Karras historically,
right?
And like, yeah, those guys will go down, but like, you look at like Niang and Merrill, who to this point have been some of the worst shooters on the team by percentage, and that's gonna flip back. So it's like they just don't really route a lot of these attempts to dudes who are going to miss. So as long as the offense is like basically working, I just don't, it's easier to count on matching a high variance game from a team like Utah. It's like, well, yeah, Sam Merrill took 11 attempts. It makes sense that we're probably going to be right around them from a percentage standpoint, and in this case, out shooting them.
Right. And from a Cavs floor standpoint, like, you look at Darius last year where basically everything went wrong for him, and he still shot 37% from three, right? Like that's the worst case scenario for some of these guys. Whereas, I think you're seeing with Boston this year, part of why they've dropped some of those games, to your point, is they do have guys that are capable of kind of having those colder shooting nights. Drew Holiday is shooting 10% worse from three than he did last season. And, I think the fact that he shot 43% from three last year was a big part of why they were able to weather the storm of Porzingis missing time late, and particularly in the playoffs, because they were getting such a good version of Drew Holiday. And now there's a little less room for error with that. But, I do think bringing up Sam is really important when it comes to the three-point shooting. He's been in a bit of a slump. And for him to go 6 of 11, I thought was significant.
Just had to play the hometown boys, baby. Get your mojo back, Sam.
4 guys scoring 20 points in the starting lineup. It was really great to see. And I thought it was interesting, too, listening to Chris Fedor's podcast after that game, where he mentioned he talked to Sam, and Sam basically said, like, we're not playing a ton of minutes. Like, none of us are playing a lot of minutes. And that kind of makes you feel like, okay, that gives me the opportunity to go out and really kind of put in the work off the court. And he said he kind of felt that he was overworking himself, that he was putting too much time in the gym, and he needed to take a break from basketball and just kind of let his natural shooting talent, take over to some extent, that he was overthinking it a little bit. So, I think this is one of those opportunities. Obviously, we don't know how it's going to play out for the remainder of the season, but these are the type of things that, you got to pay attention to, because when there are injuries, that's going to create these opportunities for guys to maybe get a few more minutes and break out of a funk, and that can help them contribute in a smaller role. I think that that's what we hope we're seeing here with Sam Merrill, in kind of rediscovering his shooting form, because when he's coming in and he's a flamethrower off the bench, that really makes things difficult to contend with when you're an opposing defense. And I think we're also hoping the same thing with Isaac Okoro. Now, obviously, there's the injury bug that's kind of thrown a wrench into that. But I think to start the season, it was clear that he wasn't fully comfortable in the offense. He hadn't found his footing with the team early on in the year. And I really do think that the time that he had as a starter and just kind of understanding the context where he fits in with the team, I think the hope is that continues even when Max Strus is starting down the road.
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge that all these kind of role players are going to have to solve for. I really liked that he kind of just took away a step away from all the work. I feel like we've made this comparison before on the pod, but I always feel like 3-point marksmen and golfers have a ton in common. There's a reason a lot of them are really good golfers. It's because, the precise movements, the obsessive focus and repetition and routine. And I think we've all seen golfers that are just constantly tinkering with their swing because it's not, perfect. And bearing in mind that Sam also had ankle issues to start the year.
Yep.
Where,
the wrist.
And wrist issues. And I mean, talk about like the worst thing Sam Merrill can have is a wrist injury. So I do think like you can't just always like brute force your way through things. You have to almost like let go and just be like, oh yeah, I'm good at shooting. I was good at this before I put up 10,000 threes yesterday. I don't need to do that. So yeah, I thought it was a really important game for Sam. He just really hasn't had a lot of games like that this year.
Yeah, I totally agree.
And he's had a lot of games where it's like 0 of 5 or 0 of 6 or 1 of 6 on, and if you're having a game like that and 4 of the attempts are the crazy sprinting, baseline to baseline up to the top of the arc through 6 screens threes, it's like, okay, I get that. He's had games where he's had like 5 or 6 catch and shoots, pure catch and shoots that just were not falling. So like, it's a major boon. And like the reality is Karras is not going to just continue to shoot 50% from three. Like, Ty Jerome has already started to fall off a little bit in the last
sound like a bit of a hater,
weeks.
but you might be right.
Yeah, perhaps. And so if that's going to happen, if you want this team's offense to stay at the historical levels it's at, you got to find it from other places. And the best place to look is the place where you got it last year. And Sam, guys like George, whose 3-point percentages are down despite a really healthy, volume of good looks. Like, that's where you want to see that positive variance bounce back.
Yeah. And with Sam, I think it's a real feather in his cap that he was able to make an impact even when the shot wasn't falling. Like, he was doing all of the little things that we've talked a good amount about how his defense has improved, his playmaking, his cutting, his finishing at the rim. He's been playing a lot better, but at some point it gets to the Dylan Windler zone of, oh man, you're doing so much more than we expected, but you need to do the thing.
We need you to do the thing.
We need you to do the main thing. And
especially with Max coming back. Who can do a lot of the same things.
It's going to be really important for these role players to do their primary thing. I think, especially from a Kenny Atkinson standpoint, you need to know what you're getting every time you call on one of those guys from the bench, and that's going to be the tightrope walk for the rest of the season, right? Getting these guys enough minutes that they are still in a groove, that they are still able to contribute at a high level when called upon, but also kind of understanding, okay, if someone doesn't have it, what's my alternatives? What's kind of plan B and C here? And, that's going to be something to monitor the rest of the way, because that, it's very easy to say, oh, be ready for that main thing that you have to bring to the table. But basketball is such a rhythm game. It really, really is. And I think the fact that they've been able to do it as successfully as they have, that all of these role guys that, even someone like Karis LeVert that's used to playing 28, 29 minutes a game, the fact that he's been so good in 20 is really impressive. Like that it shouldn't be something taken for granted. And I think it goes to show both the amount of work that they put in, how fruitful the practices have been, and how much everyone kind of understands what's being asked of them. And also just from a coaching standpoint of really making it clear, okay, this is what we need you to do when you're on the court. I was listening to our buddy George Niang with Carmen and Lima, and he was basically saying one of the biggest things with Kenny Atkinson that he appreciates is he makes it really simple and really clear. Here's the 3 main things I expect from you when you're out there on the court. And if you're doing that, you are going to be rewarded. You are going to consistently get minutes. And we know from Kenny's media availabilities, he is such a process over results guy. And I think when you have instilled in each one of the players what is expected from them, and, kind of have an understanding of, yeah, you've missed shots, but I like the shots you're taking. I like the way you are playing the game. I think that helps you weather the storms and the ebbs and flows of things like shooting variance throughout a season.
I can't wait for the first coach to say he's a results over process guy. I want someone to zag on us, baby. Whatever road gets us up the mountain.
I think some have admitted that with their actions, but they haven't explicitly stated that. But I think that there is more than one coach that is a results over process guy.
That's absolutely fair. Sorry, I had to be obnoxious. Because it's so obvious if you really think about it that you should definitely be process over results.
You really should.
It's hard to do it in practice, man. It is.
Sometimes people miss the obvious things that they should be doing, like using Zoom and Zoom AI Companion, because only you can do your best work, Carter, but Zoom AI Companion can help you do the rest, like automatically taking notes, answering meeting questions, and helping you respond to your coworker. Available at no additional cost with eligible paid plans. Work happy with Zoom AI Companion.
I feel like that was the Wade LeBron alley-oop photo of segways.
That is pretty good.
I was really geeked about it. Everyone likes it when you pat yourself on the back. Did it matter to you at all that they closed again with Niang?
Not necessarily. Utah is playing kind of small ball, and I thought George had played really well.
Felt like George earned his way onto the floor to end that game for sure.
He really did, and I think it's again a credit to the culture and environment that when you earn that opportunity, you're going to be given that, and I think one of the best things you can say about Jared Allen is he is someone that will sacrifice for the rest of the team. I think his willingness to sacrifice is a big part of how we're able to make 4 all-star caliber talents work. But George, I thought he played really well. I thought he's been, he's having a bounce back season. I think he is playing as well defensively as you could expect in terms of his positioning and his communication out there. And, that cut to the basket at the end of the game was so much damn fun. Like, one, holy crap, Darius. Like, that. Really, the amount of times that he embarrassed Walker Kessler out there,
who I thought was great for Utah, by the way.
Yeah, not his fault at all. He was put on an island against one of the more shifty playmakers in the league, but Darius really was dancing with him, and that pass to George cutting baseline was just about as gorgeous as it gets. Gorgeous to Georges, and George finished with the reverse,
but I must tisk at our former backcourt partner. Colin fell asleep so hard. Woo, baby.
It did occur.
That is ball watching at the worst time. That was some of the stuff that, even as, fans of Colin as the two of us are and were when he was a Cavalier, was like, that's the kind of stuff that you would just see.
Yeah. And the funny thing is, like, just to touch on Sexton for a little bit, like, he has remained and he has improved in his efficiency as a scorer. He has increased his volume as a 3-point shooter. I think he was like 4 of 10 or something like that on the night. Like, he is a very, very efficient scorer. And I think sometimes that falls under the radar. But man, the defense has slipped backwards. Like, it really felt like he was making a good amount of progress, particularly that last year where, the first 10 games, he had a couple there where he wasn't playing great defensively and got benched for Rubio late in the game and then really kind of committed to that end defensively. I think it just kind of goes to show when you're on kind of one of those lotto situations for a while, like it can kind of have a negative effect. And that's
one of the worst defense in the league, the Utah Jazz.
It's one of those reasons why I continue to say, yeah, like, if we didn't trade for Donovan Mitchell, there is a world where Evan Mobley is going to be getting a lot more touches earlier on than he got. But I still think developing and learning how to be assertive and finding your spots on a winning team in a winning situation, that is more meaningful development. It's not
look at the dudes from Boston. Come on. I mean, Tatum and Brown have been going to the conference finals since they were rookies, and it's been... Yeah. And I would be thrilled to have any of our players have that kind of development curve.
And sometimes I think it just doesn't get talked about in the right way from a media standpoint, where so much of the discussion comes with the box score stuff. And, let's even when you talk about a team that's loaded with prospects, sometimes you'll hear, okay, well, like, you got to move one of these guys out so that they can get more shots and really kind of showcase their talents. I really think, and especially in this new CBA where it becomes harder to make moves and it becomes harder to, keep a lot of talent, like, finding ways to get the guys that you have to work off of one another and developing a deep team that plays for one another. I think that is going to be, the model for team building. And I really do think what we have seen from Evan Mobley and Darius Garland the last couple of years, Darius and Mobley were hurt last year, but I really do feel like both of them have become better players because of the situations that the team has been in since adding Donovan Mitchell.
I always talk about, the value of an autopsy. And sometimes when you're on these really, really bad teams, it's almost like too much blunt force trauma. It's like when you're watching like one of those crime procedurals and it's like if they found a floater and they're like, forensics isn't gonna be able to get anything off this one, it's like it's bloated, you can't, all the DNA is messed up, like there's nothing we can do. Sometimes it can get so ugly, and we've had Cavs teams like this where the results are so bad that it's really hard to come in and identify what went wrong and what parts of you led to that at an individual level. Whereas I feel like with the Cavs, their failures have been on a bigger stage because they've been better than we thought they were going to be. But like, there is that immediate, like, okay, we got punked in this we were a good team, but we got punked in this very specific way. Or we very specifically couldn't do this skill, so we have to go supplement. Like it's just a more focused autopsy in the end, and like you get really good data out of it. If the rest of if your whole body is working well and you have a problem with your liver, well, they can really focus in on the liver. They're not trying to sort through 12 other symptoms. And like, I think there is just a lot of value in growing on a good team, even if it feels worse sometimes at an individual level through that process.
Yeah, and the flip side of that is failing when you're under a microscope, which 29 teams fail at the end of the day, right? Like there's only one championship, but when you fail under a microscope, that can be a make or break moment. But I think sometimes pressure testing is the best way to find out what you have, right? Like some guys aren't going to be built for it, and you have to I think you have to have a lot of confidence in what you are doing from a team building standpoint. I think you have to have a lot of confidence as a player. Like there was a lot of outside noise when it came to this group. And, especially in today's media climate, you lose and you don't play well in a loss. So much of it gets reduced to, okay, do you have winning in your DNA? Do you it's a genetic trait on whether or not you're a winner or a loser, when we know that's not the case. We know coaches, we know players, we know everyone either gets better or worse. It is a fluid situation. And like you said, when you are put in these pressure situations and you're able to kind of look at, okay, where have we struggled? You're able to make that growth moving forward. And one of the areas that I think I've felt that the most this year is how the Cavs have performed in the clutch compared to the
baby.
Past. The Cavs that went over Utah. I think that's expected, those clutch minutes. But overall in the season, they are 11-2 in the clutch. They have the best clutch offense in the NBA with a 155 offensive rating. Absolutely absurd. They have the number 5 clutch defense with a 104 defensive rating and the number 1 net rating at plus 51. Next closest is Orlando at plus 31. The interesting thing that I wanted to bring up, though, Carter, is we had always talked about the pace in the clutch. We had talked about how we felt that they were letting the clock run down way too late, and basically they were able to run one action. And if a defense blew up that one action, they were not getting a good shot. I find it interesting that last year they were ranked 28th in pace in the clutch. This year they're 27th. Now, the thing that I want to kind of use to contextualize that is their pace this year is 98. So if you were playing a game, 98 possessions, which is only 2 possessions slower than their pace overall, which is 100. Last year was 95. So it is quite a bit quicker than last year, but just kind of within the context of, how teams are playing in the clutch, it's ranked low, but I don't feel like they're playing slow. And I think some of this is because a lot of their clutch minutes have been playing with a lead.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Also, I mean, just a holler, small sample size alert. They've only played 39 minutes in the clutch this year.
Last year was 154.
The league leaders, by the way, the Sacramento Kings at 74. So they are about half. They're 23rd in the league in terms of clutch minutes. Do you want to venture a quick guess as to who has the least?
Ooh.
The answer will
Washington
be
Wizards?
Correct. The answer is so obvious. They've only played 8 minutes of clutch time this season. Oh, man. If you can believe it. All three of their wins featured clutch time. But 8 minutes total across 8 games. So it's just yikes. But yeah, I mean, here's the reality, man. And the one thing I will push back on just from your kind of framing of this is like you mentioned, like, hey, I get it. Against the Utah Jazz, you would expect to win. I don't think that's necessarily true, because if you're a team that's not good in the clutch, generally you're a team that's abandoning your principles and just trying to will your way to wins. And talent flattens out really fast in that environment,
Mm-hmm.
Like everything kind of gets more even and left up to chance if it's just 2 teams playing functionally like, beliefless basketball at the same time. And that's why I think it's been frustrating in the past as this team has gone into the clutch, where I felt like they've kind of abandoned some of those principles and just kind of were just trying to play basically hero ball or some version, some equivalent of it. And so I actually think even the fact that you go out and you stomp Utah down the stretch of this game, and what is a 3-point game with like a minute and a half left becomes an 11-point win. Like, that's not nothing, even though it's against a team that's not very good, because that's kind of the difference between great teams and good teams. Like, how many times, you know, when we were watching those 16 Warriors, when they just could not lose, did teams have them on the ropes with 3 minutes left, and then the haymaker came, and then they were up 14, and you were like, well, I guess they're just inevitable. You know, that was the word we used a lot when we were doing our 2016 rewatch series, was that the Warriors felt inevitable. And it was because of crap like that, where they always would get the timely run, the timely buckets to take a close game and a competitive game and make it not that way anymore. And that's exactly what the Cavs have done all year.
Yeah. And, you know, I think that's a really valid correction. And, you know, it's hard to critique anything with pace because the offensive efficiency has been so high, right? Like, it really does feel like they are getting consistently good shots. And I think part of that is, you know, they have more guys that they feel comfortable going to. You didn't feel comfortable going to Darius Garland last year in those situations. He was not himself physically. And when you look at how he's been playing in the clutch this season, he's been phenomenal. Like, he's been out of his mind good when it comes to those clutch minutes. You know, you look at his clutch stats, he is 15 of 21 from the field and 3 of 6 from 3 in the clutch, 7 assists, 1 turnover. Donnie is 11 of 24 from the field, 6 of 10 from 3, 3 assists, 0 turnovers. Like, they've been so efficient, and they've been comfortable going to Evan Mobley in those situations as well. He's had so many big buckets and so many big passes that either lead to an assist or lead to the pass that leads to the dagger. And, you know, you talk about the 39 minutes in those 13 games. Well, that means they're only averaging about 3 minutes of clutch in those final 5 minutes, because a lot of the time they're burying teams. They are putting them away. They are extending it to that 11-point lead. And I just feel like the process in those minutes is sound, even if they are slowing it down just a little bit because they have the lead. They're not slowing it so much that they are playing defensive turtle basketball. They are still playing with a good tempo. They are still generating good shots in those situations. And I think as much as some of that is schematic and the belief that they have in this system, I think some of it is just, you know, the muscle memory and the scars of the past and the learned experience with one another. When you see the best teams in the league, when you see some of the best basketball, prettiest basketball that you've seen, it's always teams that have had some element of continuity when it comes to their core guys. Even that 2016 Warriors team, those guys had played together for a while. The Spurs, when they were playing beautiful basketball, it was a while. I think back to the Miami Heat, their first year together. Wasn't pretty because it took some time, but, you know, you get to the 2-3 years later, they're playing great basketball. And I think that's one of those things where, you know, that second nature understanding of where one another is going to be on the court and the collective belief that they've built this season, I think that's where it really pays dividends.
Yeah, man. And, you know, again, this is where you just got to give credit to the front office and even all the way up to the ownership group, where most teams, you know, it's easy to say, give guys time together, but not everyone and every group is worthy of keeping them together. You know, there's a reason. Yeah. It's not just like every single front office in the league has an itchy trigger finger and they just get bored like me after 5 games of a 2K franchise and want to start changing it up. Like, I think there's probably a little bit of that, sure, but like a lot of it is you're constantly deciding who gets to hang with you, you know,
right, long
term, both in terms of what you're willing to pay them, whether you even just want them around long term, whether you can trade them for an upgrade. I mean, this was a very trade happy front office for 3-4 years, and the last 2 has pretty much stopped. Yeah. So, you know, it's a constant battle of trying to figure out who's worth sticking to. And clearly this Cavs core, this group of 8, 9, 10 rotation guys has proven that they're a group worth sticking with, and like the team is really reaping the rewards. But we've certainly seen teams that have hung around too long. Some of those last couple year Lob City Clippers teams were like funeral marches, where they were so clearly over each other. So it's a delicate alchemy.
Miami Heat.
Yeah, you're telling me. And so like it's a delicate alchemy here, and I think the Cavs front office gets a lot of credit for making those calls.
Yeah, and I think part of it too is just the various streams that they've used to improve the team, right? Like it wasn't always obvious that adding Max Strus and George Niang last offseason and Ty Jerome, like with Jerome getting hurt, with Niang having a down season, and Max Strus basically being asked to do too much because of the situation with the point guards, how good those moves were wasn't apparent right away, but they had confidence, right? They had confidence in the process of what they had added. They understood the value of adding shooting to what they already had in a very successful season in 22-23. And, they were stuck with it. And then you go beyond that and you look at the internal development, not only of, the young players that they've drafted highly in Darius Garland, who's improved a ton, Evan Mobley, who's improved a ton, already has made 27 threes this year. His previous career high in a season was 23. He's improved a ton. Isaac Okoro has improved a ton. You look, the last 3 calendar years, Carter, Okoro is shooting over 39% from three. Like, that is a guy that has put in a ton of work. And I will continue to bring this up anytime we talk about his development. He is the same age as Evan Mobley. Like, he came out a little early, and I think sometimes that's been overlooked. But that's a guy that's now done it for 3 years and has really grown into a well-rounded 3-and-D player. But beyond what they've done with the highly drafted guys, you have Sam Merrill, who, was kind of overlooked because of some injuries and, physical limitations, gave him an opportunity with the charge, turned him into a real player. Dean Wade, undrafted player that they turned into a real player. Lamar Stevens, even though he's not with the team anymore, that was a good find to have, honestly. And Craig Porter Jr. is an undrafted player who now, because the team is deeper and Ty Jerome is healthy, they have an opportunity to, hey, let's get him some minutes with the charge. Let's continue developing the jump shot. Let's round out his game. Let's take the approach that we expected last season rather than, seeing if he can sink or swim filling in for 3-4 injured point guards, right? So I think the fact that they are not just relying on free agency or the trade market, but really exploring every opportunity in every single avenue is what helps give them some room for error, and it helps them develop the depth that they have.
Yeah, man. Can we talk a little bit about Evan? And just, I feel like the leap he's taking has, I feel like he got a ton of press at the beginning of the year. Then it's kind of died down a little bit. And I think in some ways earned, we had segments on here where we talked about how he had kind of receded a little bit in the offense, wasn't doing as much initiating. It feels like everything's flipped back up, and not only are the counting stats up now, like all the efficiency stuff is back. Like, he's shooting more threes than he's ever shot. They're going in higher than he's doubled his 3-point attempts per 36 so far this year. He's up to he was at 1.4 the last 3 years. He's up to 2.8 per 36. The 2-point field goal percentage was down for the first month of the season. It was one of the only things that I was like, yeah, he's getting more points, getting the bucket more, but keep an eye because the efficiency's gone down. He's back to 60.5%. He's matching last year, scoring from 2. So he's not only taking these more difficult and higher volume of shots, two more attempts, field goal attempts per 36, but he's also getting back to converting at a really elite level. Obviously, the box score stuff has popped as of late. Even the little things that he is almost back to his rookie year foul rate. Justin, he was at 2.3 per 36 his rookie year. Was up to 3.1 last year, and it felt like he was in foul trouble a lot last year. back down to 2.5. Like, it just feels like everything is coming together for this dude. And he has after like that like month of like kind of quiet, good still, but maybe quieter good, feels like he's back to like, damn, is this guy like the best player on the team? My God.
Yeah, like you're on the money. You look at what he did against Utah, and 22 points, 10 rebounds, 4 assists, 3 blocks, 1 steal. Like, that is a dominant stat line. And I really feel like since we had that conversation where we're like, hey, like the touches are actually going up, but he's not doing as much with it. I think that correlated, like right after that, we had heard something from Kenny Atkinson about, okay, we're like really pushing Mobley to be more assertive with the touches he gets. But I feel like he is consistently being assertive. He is consistently kind of imposing his will. And, you know, the lefty dunks and like the ambitious attempts he takes and the turnaround jumpers and facing guys up and really like going for the throat. I feel like there's more and more confidence in his game. And, you know, you can see how much the team feeds off it as well, how much they're giving that positive reinforcement anytime he's doing that. And I got to say, like, I would say it's my biggest surprise through 30 games is just where Evan Mobley is at right now. I thought that he was going to take a step forward this year, but this has been a legitimate leap earlier than I expected. Where he's at now is kind of like where I hoped he would get by mid-April, because he's always gone better throughout the year. He's always kind of had that, all right, you know, mid-January, he's starting to take a leap. He's adding things to his game. He's being more assertive. He's already kind of where I realistically hoped that he could get. And if he continues that trend and takes a further step, and the stuff that we are seeing, you know, in more consistent flashes, these high watermarks become more and more frequent, and, you know, the lows become even higher, that really opens up possibilities for the Cavs. That is the version of this team that is a contender. But right now, like, he has to be in that conversation for one of the best big men in the league. He is, you know, you look at someone like Rudy Gobert that's made all-star teams and all NBA players or all NBA teams averaging, you know, 16 and 10. Evan Mobley's that level of defender while being a more dynamic playmaker, while being able to initiate for himself, while putting up larger stats. Like, we are talking about an all-NBA talent. We are talking about a franchise-level talent when it comes to Evan Mobley. And I don't know about you. I feel like we talked about this in the past, but I feel like there's a learning curve for me as an analyst when it comes to talking about a star big and how they can impact the game. Because in my time being a Cavs fan, there hasn't been an Evan Mobley archetype. Like,
no.
the you know, like Tristan Thompson, really easy to understand and contextualize. Even Kevin Love as an all-star level talent, we can understand that. But the driving force was always, you know, a LeBron James level talent. You know, Kyrie Irving. Oh, you can understand exactly what that is. We you know, fall in love with that below the rim game and the way to manipulate a defense. And, you know, Darius Garland kind of follows on that same path. I think for myself as a Cavs fan, and, you know, I think it's a sentiment that some might share as well. I think that there's a learning curve, learning to play or learning to watch and be a fan of a dynamic big that can create for themselves and others and be a secondary playmaking hub. And, you know, you see it with other teams, but it's a totally different thing when you get to watch a guy like this for 82 games.
I think it's also just different because Evan, in a lot of ways, is kind of a throwback big, you know? Like, there's a reason I like the Duncan comp so much, in the sense that he can dominate a game without needing, like, the eye-popping box score at the end of the game, you know. 22, 10, and 4 is not going to lead, you know, Sports Center. But, like, when you watch, you go, oh, he owned that game. He controlled that game thoroughly for huge stretches. And, like, you know, and so I think there's even a difference watching a guy like him and watching a guy like Jokic or Embiid, who are singular in their own way, but they also are, like, running point guard. You know, Jokic in a lot of cases is running point guard. You know, he's doing a lot of the stuff we saw LeBron do, you know, in terms of, like, his literal role. Like, Evan is almost, I know, like, it's funny because he obviously gets the unicorn tag, but in some ways his impact on the game as a big is more archetypal. You know, I am going to defend at a really, really high level. I'm going to make connected plays. I'm going to use my length to finish over guys. I'm going to duck in the right spots and get easy buckets. Like, in some ways, he is more of an archetypal big than some of these other his fellow unicorn peers, even though he can do all that stuff too. I just don't think, like, I think that's almost like the cherry on top, whereas like the baseline stuff is kind of what makes Evan special, and it's also kind of what made a guy like Tim Duncan special. It wasn't the splash stuff, it was the every single possession stuff.
Yeah, it's really,
does that make sense?
It does, and you know, he's a throwback power forward in a lot of ways. And it's almost like the evolutionary version of David West, what he did with those, you know, Pelicans teams, right? Where he does provide that playmaking, except instead of being, you know, 6'9" and a little stockier, it is this freak athlete at 7 feet tall that's playing off of, you know, a dynamic point guard in Darius Garland or Chris Paul when you think back to those Hornets teams. And you have that Tyson Chandler, Jared Allen rim protector playing kind of that traditional big man role. Like, I think that's what I like about it so much. And, you know, when you look at how Kenny Atkinson has utilized him and how his evolution has opened up and made everything make more sense for the Cavs offensively, like, I think that's why I'm enjoying it so much, because it is a throwback to, you know, a type of basketball that I really enjoyed. Those Hornets teams were one of my favorite teams to watch. Like, I loved that version of Chris Paul. I was rooting against the Spurs and hoping to see that team have success. And when, you know, you add an element of a Donovan Mitchell to that mix, it is just a totally different ball game. But, you know, getting to understand what Evan Mobley is capable of has been a really fun journey. And I think the best part about it is you can tell he's learning what he's capable of too, right? Like, he's starting to get that hunger. He's getting, this is going to sound ridiculous because we're talking about basketball, but he's getting that taste for blood. Like, when he exposes someone and he dunks on them, or, you know, he crosses them up and hits a fadeaway jumper or turnaround or whatever, you can tell he's like, oh, I liked how that felt. I'm going to go at them again. And I think, you know, it's part of what makes the Cavs special, that they recognize that when, you know, oh, Donovan's got it going right now, we're going to feed him. You know, Evans, he's feeling himself a little bit. We're going to keep getting him the ball. Darius is feeling himself. Let's get him the ball. Like, they really like that. And you know, it's that collective aggressiveness and how they feed off of it that I think makes this team so special.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. He is figuring things out. He is learning what he can get away with. You know, in the end, what he can play with. And you mentioned David West, and you know, I think every time I'm getting a little off topic here, but as you were talking about this, I always go back to, like, what do I angst about with this team? You know, what are the things that you'll hear some people say about a team like this that doesn't have a top 5 player on it as of now? You know, you don't have a Jokic, you don't have a prime LeBron or anything like that. And, you know, sometimes you'll see people kind of compare this team to, like, that Hawks team that won high 60s under Budenholzer. And, like, I think the second you can certainly find some comparables, but then you just go, but they didn't have Evan Mobley. They didn't have Donovan Mitchell. They didn't have Darius Garland. Like they, you know, like, they just didn't have this top end talent like that. Like, wasn't even close to, you know, like, I think even at the time, even the biggest Hawks fan would have told you that, like, Jeff Teague, you know, current Cavaliers assistant Damari Carroll, Kyle Korver, Al Horford, Paul Millsap, they're never going to play better than this. This is the fully actualized version of these guys. And like, you know, that team, a lot of people in the basketball community loved that Hawks team. You know,
Oh yeah,
and in fairness,
the majority of ESPN analysts picked them over the Cavs.
yeah,
in
and we
2015.
probably would have loved him too if we weren't busy kicking their teeth in every year. But you know, like a lot of people love them, but I just don't think anyone ever. I think even if you thought they were going to win, they were a championship worthy team. It was because what they were right that second was good enough. You know,
Yeah.
Whereas I just feel like this Cavs team just has so much more room to grow by comparison.
Yeah. They really do, and that's why I get excited anytime that there is a test, you know, on the schedule. And you know, I'm a little disappointed looking at tomorrow's matchup against Denver. Aaron Gordon's been ruled out with a calf injury. You know, he played in the first game against the Cavs, and
he is a tough matchup for us.
He played really well in that game, but I love seeing how Evan and Jared played against him. I love, as you mentioned before we previewed the first game against Denver. They're such a fun test. They really test your basketball IQ. Jokic is going to be that guy that's going to either bend or break your defense. So I'm really excited to see that against Jokic. But I think there's a lot of interesting matchups when you talk about, you know, the bigs that we're going to see on this West Coast trip, because, you know, Mobley's going to go up against Jokic. He's going to go up against Draymond Green. He's going to hopefully go up against Anthony Davis, who had an ankle injury on Christmas, but did say he was going to play Saturday. So that, you know, gives us some confidence that he's going to play. And, you know, Dallas, I don't really measure Evan against PJ Washington, Derek Lively. But, you know, they are a good defensive team. So how he does it against these good defenses and against, you know, very strong big men, that's going to be interesting. That's one of those things I'm really looking forward to when it comes to this West Coast trip.
Yeah, one thing I'll note regarding the West Coast trip, that and specifically the Denver game, even though the Cavs haven't played for 2-3 days, they didn't travel till today because you know, Christmas. It's you know, makes perfect sense, but you know, ideally, you know, I think you know, in a non-holiday situation, you're getting there maybe a day earlier. You're getting some acclimation in. You know, they're going to be probably sucking wind at different points in this game.
Making excises already.
Not
I'm
making
so
excuses.
Proud of you. I
just thought
so
it was
proud of
noteworthy because I was keeping my eye on when they travel. Because obviously it's just a weird spot, you know. Though they really should be well rested, for sure. You know, also noticed Isaac's on the trip, which I thought was nice to see. Obviously, don't know what that, you know, he's already been ruled out of this game on Friday, but you know, I think we're right at the 1 week mark since the injury was announced. You know, I think the original statement from the Cavs said he would be reevaluated after 2 weeks. But I mean, I thought it was at least a nice indicator that he's not too banged up.
Yeah, I forget who the beat reporter was. Maybe I'll just give a blanket shout out to Fedor, Ethan Sands, and Danny Cunningham. But noted that in practice, Isaac was doing shooting drills, kind of free throw line extended, and working on a ramp up already. So, you know, that was nice to see. Obviously, you know, I don't expect them to come back sooner than the timeline, and I expect them to take a cautious approach because they can afford to do so. But, you know, I think that's one of those things where, you know, his arm's not in a sling when you see him on the sideline, and that gives you some confidence about, you know, the severity of it.
Yeah, I mean, and again, this is where this weird Cavs schedule that is, I mean, one of the lightest Decembers I can ever remember, in a lot of ways. Though obviously they're making up for it a little bit with a couple of 3 and 4s to close the year, you know, between the Milwaukee Philly one and obviously the Golden State LA one on the road at the end of the month.
I think we have 2 days on both sides of the Warriors. LA.
You are right. So sorry, just back to back, a normal boring back to back. But like, yeah, I mean, it's just been a light December, so some of these injuries just don't feel quite so bad. Where, oh man, you know, you hear a guy's going to be out 2 weeks and then be reevaluated, like, oh, he's going to miss 12 games. You know, it just feels like he's going to miss a trillion games, and it's like, well, we've played 3 games since Isaac was announced to be out. And we'll play 3 more until we hit the next week. So definitely good to see him on that road trip. Dude, a lot of the stuff is just lined up for the Cavs. I mean, you have Gordon out tomorrow. You've got Luka out for the Dallas game almost certainly. Anthony Davis sprained an ankle on Christmas and did not return to that game against the Warriors yesterday for that Lakers game. Like, the door is open, as much as we cried and complained and moaned about injury luck last year. I think you have to kind of, tip your cap to the basketball gods and say thank you.
Regression to the mean, baby. It's
when,
no
when
longer,
you get it back the other way, baby.
it's no longer every single star player returning against the Cavs. But I do got to say, like, Luka being out really bums me out.
Yeah, I was excited for that one.
One, I'm just not enamored with Dallas like everybody else. Maybe, that goes back to what you were saying about the Hawks. Not that they are on the level of that Hawks team, but we have played really well against them. I think, we swept them last year, including a game without Garland, Mitchell, and Mobley. And I think we've played them really well.
That was the max half quarter, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's, I think Donovan played for that one, but the one we beat them in Dallas was without those guys. But we've played well against them the last few years, and they're a top 10 offense and defense. I was kind of excited to see that. I want to be tested. I want to see how they do against these teams. And when you're on a West Coast trip, sometimes the schedule itself is part of the test. If they go 3-1 on this trip, I'll feel really good about it.
It weirdly does crank the pressure up to win, though. You're shooting for you're on pace to challenge the franchise record. You're on pace for a high 60s season, so you don't lose games to the Mavs when Luka isn't playing.
Yeah.
Stuff like that does it takes the pressure off, but then kind of puts it right back on because what would be an acceptable loss becomes kind of an embarrassing one.
Yeah, and it's still a game that they are capable of losing, right? Any game out of 82, you can certainly lose. And Dallas is still going to have a very good defensive team. They're still going to have a very dynamic offensive player in Kyrie Irving. In all likelihood, it's these things can happen. So I think, as I said, if the Cavs go 3-1 on this road trip, I'm feeling great about that. I love the fact that we have a 4-game lead over Boston already. That gives you a lot of breathing room. But if they can do better than that, we're now in that stretch where we discuss what's realistic for a week or two, and what we'd like to see from kind of a schedule standpoint. But we've been doing that all year, and they've exceeded those expectations. Every time you have a 2-week stretch where you exceed expectations and you have a clean sheet and you don't add an L to it, it just it makes the possibilities of what this season win total can be. It just continues to accelerate.
Yeah, I mean, I've moved my goalpost 10 times on this thing. Mm-hmm. Man, that 4-game lead, those 2 consecutive losses for Boston were huge. Getting up to a four-game lead.
There's a perfect example of how you can lose any of 82.
Yeah.
Losing to Orlando without Franz, without Suggs, without Paolo,
without Mo, even.
Yeah, without Mo Wagner, that team is decimated. But that's the type of thing that can happen, man. It's especially we've seen it. The Warriors, when they rested everybody and Ty Jerome went nuts from 3. You take your foot off the gas one night and you keep that door cracked open, you are susceptible to shooting variance. You are susceptible to a try-hard team looking to make a statement. And when you have the best record in the NBA, everybody's going to give their best shot. Everyone, if they are having a bad 2 weeks, they are going to look to turn their season around versus you. If you're going against Denver, who is 5-2 in their last 7, they want to legitimize the fact that they're playing better basketball, especially coming off a loss to the Suns. They want to say, all right, we lost to Phoenix, but we beat Cleveland. We beat the team with the best record in the league. You are going to be getting your best their best punch every single night. So you become, susceptible to your own success in some ways.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely fair. I think it's part of the fun of this.
It's fun as hell.
That you kind of you want to just keep avalanching down the hill. As I've mentioned, I think the 1 seed really matters. For the Cavs, matters more for the Cavs than it matters for the Boston Celtics.
Mm-hmm.
And if it matters more for you, then pouncing on these opportunities where Boston's going through a rough run of play and taking this stuff really seriously. Even through the holidays, which is really hard to focus on during. like that is meaningful. Now they're at the point where if they do somehow take that season series with Boston, and that really, if they can get that tiebreaker with Boston up 4, like I know there's a lot of season left, but like a 4-game,
think about it.
A 4-game gap is important even now. And I think they should be. I think that should be the number one thing on their bulletin board right now is 1 seed. They should always know where Boston is, what Boston's doing. And I think I'm obsessed with Boston, so I sure hope they are.
Yeah, I'm sure they are. The other thing is it changes the calculus for Boston too, right? Like we're sitting here and we're like, yeah, you can take your time, bring guys back a week later than maybe that they're able to, just to make sure there's no setbacks. It changes the calculus from Boston's standpoint, whether or not you're going to rest guys, whether or not you can afford to take a day off. Like it might force you to be a little more aggressive because you're trying to go for the 1 seed. And I agree with you. I think home court throughout the playoffs really matters. I think if you get into a series against Boston, you're going to need to win one in Boston no matter what. You're going to have to win one on the road because they are going to win one in Cleveland.
But I don't want to win 2.
Exactly. But when you are the road team in that series, you might have to win 2, right? Because they're going to win one in Cleveland on the road. So I just think, you give yourself a better chance to win in May if you're able to get that 1 seed. And my God, is it fun talking about winning in May. I am so damn excited for this team. And, they're always going to face a little bit of an uphill climb because the media loves the Western Conference. And, I would argue that, and I know you feel the same way, like it's not exactly the cream of the crop. It's a lot of depth in the middle. But, until Chet Holmgren comes back and is fully healthy and shows that he can play kind of at an all-star level, I just feel
Brother, we're still behind the Knicks on title odds right now.
I mean, I certainly wouldn't do that, but that's
disgusting. I think we're like 7th or 8th in the league right now.
I'm not a gambler, but it's that's something to consider. But the more times you can beat the Western teams, the more of a chance you're going to get some national media attention. This team deserves national media attention. They're going to need that in order to get the number of All-Stars that they deserve to have. So trips like this, really damn important because these are going to be games that those folks are actually watching. We will certainly be watching. We will not be going post game because those games are late. We will be back on Sunday. We'll be recapping the Nuggets game and looking ahead to the rest of the week. Big thanks to everyone that tuned in live on YouTube. Make sure you guys are liking, subscribe, click that notification bell so you know when we're going live. If you're listening via podcast and you want to support us, leave us a rating, leave a review, subscribe, unsubscribe, resubscribe, and help cook those books. If you want to be part of Chase Down's exclusive Discord chat, send a screenshot of the review to chasedownpod@gmail.com. However you choose to support us, we really do appreciate it. Make sure you guys are staying safe out there. Until next time, go Cavs.